Hello, my name is Sheila Loftus, and I'm the Corporate Compliance Officer at the Southern Tier Independence Center. And this is the annual Corporate Compliance Training. And I want to start by saying, if you have not done your pre-test yet, don't worry about it. We'll just skip to your post-test, because as I do the training, I will give you the answers to the post-test, okay? As I mentioned before, this is an annual training. You have to take it once yearly. That does not mean once every 365 days, but once in a calendar year. So because you're taking it today, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to have to take it next year again in the same month, but sometime next year you'll have to take it again if you're doing the same job. So I want to give you a little bit of background on why we are required to do this. So back in 2005, the New York Times did an article on Medicaid fraud and abuse, and it was actually called New York State Medicaid Fraud Might Reach into the Billions. New York State bills the most in Medicaid to any of the states in the United States. So the article went on to describe several different types of fraud that they had seen when they did some audits. One was, or one thing that they found were ambulances that were transporting people that could walk. They found school districts that were billing for speech pathology for students that had no problem speaking. And my personal favorite is the dentist that was billing 991 procedures per day, again, to Medicaid. I don't know about your dentist, but my dentist is very good, and I doubt she could do 991 procedures per day. So once that article came out, New York State and the federal government established the Office of the Medicaid Inspector General. And the acronym for that is OMIG. It is OMIG. And their job is purely to audit agencies that bill Medicaid to make sure we're not committing fraud. And of course, check into any complaints anybody has, that type of thing. They require us to do a number of things. One is that we have to have a compliance officer, which again is me, Sheila Loftus. We have to have policies and procedures in place to report fraud if you or anybody else was aware of it. And we need to have internal and external audits to make sure we have the proper paperwork in place. So, and that's, by the way, the answer to your first question. So lastly, I just want to say that during the training, I do frequently talk about Medicaid. However, I want you to understand that all of the funding sources that we have here at STIC follow similar rules and regulations. So although I specifically mentioned Medicaid, it also would meet the requirements for the Office of the Aging and any other funding sources that we have. So I just want to mention that to you. So what is corporate compliance? It's a system to detect and prevent the violations of the law, as well as the likelihood of ethical and fraudulent behavior. Stop the behavior as soon as possible, discipline the individuals involved, and make recommendations to policy and procedure if that's what we need to do. So I just want to go over, so things have changed in the last year or so in terms of how folks report their time. It was a requirement by the federal government that we do a different, our agency and other agencies do a different type of clocking in and clocking out for some of the different programs that we have. So I'm going to start with the CDPA, Consumer Directed Personal Assistant Program. So you as well as the Community Hub folks clock in by a system called EVV, which is Electronic Visit Verification. So when logging in, it grabs your location and the phone number, and it does that by GPS, and it pings it to the system. It is important that it is best if you can log in from the consumer's home and log out from the consumer's home, because that is the number that's typically in the system. If you have other numbers, I know that you can contact folks in CDPA and speak to them about that. And I know they give you a lengthy training on that, so I'm not going to go into all the particulars. I do want to mention, and they asked me to mention this, if your consumer has more than one worker, make sure before you clock in that you know that the person that worked before you clocked out, before you clock in. And a lot of times, people have CDPAs that work one right after another. So again, you could ask the consumer, or you could check with the other CDPA to make sure they've clocked out before you clock in. In terms of DSPs, same thing. You're using the EVV system. When you clock in and out, you use your tablet. This, again, pings your location from the second it takes you to clock in and clock out. If the web clock is unavailable or inaccessible to you, you can also use the telephonic timekeeping system, but you must use the consumer's phone. For a missed clock in or out, or an incorrect start or stop time, you must use a paper verification form. And that form is filled out with dates and times worked, and it needs to be signed by the DSP as well as the consumer. You will also use that same verification form if you make a mistake and you try to go back in and edit your time to your tablet. You still have to fill out one of these verification forms. Lastly, I want to mention that, again, this particular system was put into place to limit the amount of fraud that was happening in the Medicaid system. I will tell you that since this has been put in place, I've had a number of investigations looking into people who may or may not have committed fraud. I will tell you that we might not catch you the first time if you are committing fraud, but we will catch you. And if we can prove that you have committed fraud, we will terminate you and we will make you ineligible to work in the program again, in any program at STEC. So I just want you to be aware of that, okay? And again, what we've tried to do and what the government has tried to do is if you make a human error, because we all make human errors because we're humans, there's ways to go around that in terms of, calling payroll or filling out a verification form, depending on what program you're in to fix a problem if you make an error. So the benefits of a compliance program. It provides guidance to employees regarding appropriate behaviors that relates to fraud and abuse. It improves and again, so you get training on what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, just going over how you would clock into a timesheet and that type of thing. It improves the quality, efficiency, and consistency of services. If you are providing services to your consumer based on the plan of care that's in place and the hours you have allotted to you, then your person's getting better care than somebody who's being dishonest about it. Somebody who says they're working with the consumer and actually isn't. When I first started working at STIC a number of years ago, I got a call from an individual who was getting services, and she started off the phone call by saying, my worker is there the whole time. She's there the whole time. And here, I'm thinking she's calling to give her worker a compliment. She said, but the problem is she sits and watches TV. She said, she did teach my cat how to use the litter box, but I don't think she was supposed to do that. Probably not. I doubt that was part of her plan and that Medicaid wants to pay for something like that. So again, if you are providing services to your consumer based on the hours you have and the plan of care in place, your person's getting better care than somebody that's sitting there watching TV, okay? It would encourage you to report potential problems, and we'll talk about that in a couple of slides from now, how you would do that. Again, initiates appropriate and decisive corrective action. When we're able to do that, obviously we have to follow Medicaid rules and regulations. So sometimes we just can't fix things that people want fixed, but we do the best we can to make it easier for folks. And hopefully through early detection, it does minimize the amount of money we pay back to the government for false claims or any types of civil damages if we find them. Who is responsible for corporate compliance? Every STIC employee is responsible for corporate compliance, and that is the answer to that question. So again, a lot of folks that provide services at STIC do it outside the walls of the building. We can't be with everybody to make sure that they're doing the right thing and taking care of their consumers. So it's everybody's responsibility to make sure they're following the rules and regulations and providing the services that your consumer wants and certainly deserves. The corporate compliance plan includes the program, the code of conduct, and incorporates any applicable state and federal laws. This is our code of conduct. It says you will maintain professional relationships with consumers, meaning we would expect that you would treat everyone with dignity and respect. You would not be abusive to them, treat them badly in any way, take advantage of them, any type of thing like that. That you would provide excellent services, again, based on the plan of care that you have and the hours you have allotted to you. That you would protect confidential information. And I think this is an important thing as well. In a lot of cases, you may be providing services to somebody that you know. It could be a family member, next door neighbor, friend of the family's, but somebody that you know. Keep in mind that the information that you have about your individual should not be shared with other folks out in the parking lot. You should not be sharing it with your own family or the consumer's family unless you have permission to do that, or you are providing services to a child and you're talking to the parents. You should not be putting anything on social media about the services you actually provide to somebody, because that is breaking confidentiality. Again, we would encourage you to report fraud, and I will talk about that in a couple slides from now. You should avoid conflict of interest. So if you are a DSP, you are not allowed to provide services to somebody that you live with, and you are not allowed to provide services to a child of yours. So, you know, back when these rules went into place, originally the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities indicated that if your consumer lived in an outlying area and it was difficult for them to find a worker, they might allow somebody who lives with that individual to provide services. But so far, and it's been quite a few years, even when we've asked about that, we have been refused. So I guess I would stick with, you're not allowed to provide services to somebody that you live with. In CDPA, you are not allowed to provide services to your spouse, and you are not allowed to provide services to your child unless you have an adult child for whom you are not responsible, you do not support them, and they are, you know, separate from you, you're not their guardian, in which case you may be allowed to provide services to that adult child. And the last thing is keeping accurate and complete records. And I think we kind of went over that with the EVV information. So, you know, part of the issues used to be people not putting the proper times down on their, written down on their timesheets. Now we do have still have some difficulties occasionally with people forgetting to clock in or clock out. But pretty much that system that's been put in place does make your clock in and clock out more accurate. And for folks that are providing community hab, again, writing your notes, providing the services that you actually provided for that day, and the response of your consumer is something that's important. This is STIC's mission statement. STIC's mission is to shape a world in which people with disabilities are empowered to live fully integrated lives in their communities. We offer assistance, advocacy, and services to children and adults with all disabilities, increasing their independence and allowing them to pursue their dreams. We also support their families and friends, as well as businesses, agencies, and governmental entities, enabling them to better meet the needs of people with disabilities. And finally, we educate and influence our community and public policy so that everyone can access their world. This is STIC's value statement. We value the ability of every human being to reach for their dreams. We hold that each individual has strengths and weaknesses which must be taken into account in their journey toward their dreams. Each individual must accept responsibility for their dream, their journey, as well as the work to get there. We offer support, ideas, tools, training, respect, and concern. We will not do for when it can be done by the person. We will not patronize for the sake of efficiency or in the guise of caring. We will try to understand when this causes fear, anger, and frustration. As we develop programs and policies, we will be guided by the dreams and abilities of those we serve. No matter how difficult the road is, we will always choose the path of inclusion and integration. We will not sacrifice our principles or values for money, convenience, or expediency. We will not shy away from controversy if that controversy will further our mission. We offer hope and continue to look at each person as a unique and joyful experience that will teach us and take us on a journey we've never been. So STIC is an independent living center, and our philosophy is a little bit different than maybe some of the other local agencies. We believe that people with disabilities should be empowered to control the direction of their own lives. This means choosing their goals, plotting their course, taking responsibility for their actions and results. People with disabilities have the right to make their own choices and decisions, and the right to make mistakes and learn and benefit from those mistakes, just like we all do. And honestly, personally speaking, I learn more by the things I make mistakes in than I have successes in. So we don't necessarily believe if you have a disability, you belong in a group home, a nursing home, or any other kind of home, if that's not where you want to be. We believe that if people want to live independently in the community, they should be allowed to do that. And in programs like CDPA, in a lot of cases, if consumers were not getting services through CDPA, they would have to be in a nursing home because maybe they can no longer get out of bed by themselves or make a meal or do their laundry, or do some of the, activities of daily living that need to be done if you're living by yourself. And in terms of community hab, in a lot of cases, in some cases you are providing services like that, but in a lot of cases you're teaching people the skills they need to live independently, how to balance a bank book, how to go out and make good choices in terms of food, how to make a meal, how to do your laundry, things like that. So certainly both programs, all the programs that stick, allow people to be as independent as they possibly can be. So these are some of the applicable state and federal laws which are put into place that give you an idea, if you committed fraud, what kinds of penalties you need to pay. So the first one here is the Federal False Claims Act. It was first implemented during the Civil War to target corrupt carpetbaggers. It's currently being used for Medicaid and Medicare fraud. Talks about knowingly presenting a false or fraudulent claim for payment or approval. In this case, you're falsifying the hours that you've actually worked, or that you say you worked and you didn't. So effective August 1st of 2016, anyone who knowingly makes a false claim is liable to the U.S. government for a civil penalty of no less than $10,781 and no more than $21,563 plus 3 times the amount of damages. Excuse me, the next law is called the Administrative Remedies for False Claims. Again, talks about administrative recoveries by federal agencies if you falsify a claim, or falsify a timesheet. So effective August 1st of 2016, this also was changed. If a person knowingly makes a false claim, the agency receiving the claim can impose a penalty of, again, $10,781 and recover 2 times the amount of the claim. The New York State False Claims Act is very similar to the federal one, has similar penalties. The next one is Social Services Law. It talks about applying for or receiving public assistance, including Medicaid, by intentionally making a false or misleading statement or intending to do so. So I don't know in terms of your jobs how much you would have to do with this particular law, but you might. If you are providing services to maybe a cousin or something, they might ask you for assistance with filling out an application for food stamps or a recert for Medicaid or something like that. Please, if you do help anybody with that or you do it yourself, make sure that you put all your income down on that application. Broome County in particular really cracks down on fraud, and they look very closely at this. Excuse me. So a friend of mine a few years ago applied for food stamps. She was a single mom, had several children. And when she filled out the application, she neglected to put down the salary of her 16-year-old son. He worked 5 hours a week at minimum wage, which was a lot less back a few years ago than it is now. And she didn't think about it. He kept the money. She just didn't think about it. So don't you know, she was called in to the district attorney's office and was charged with fraud. She had to get an attorney to defend her. And eventually they did decide that it was an accident, it was a human error, but they did sanction her for a whole year. So she was not able to get food stamps for a whole year because of that human error. So again, if you ever have to fill out any forms like that or assist anybody with doing that, particularly the income they're going to be looking at. So make sure that the person puts down all their income. The next piece of social services law talks about folks who get SSI. So if your consumer gets SSI and gets Medicaid, and they get Medicaid through that, in addition to the other money we just talked about, you'll be paying an additional $6,000 to $12,000 per claim and 2 to 3 times the amount you falsely received if you make a false claim. In addition, you might have to pay the government's legal fees, and your consumer could file a lawsuit against you. This last piece of social services law talks about people who use somebody else's benefit card to get medical benefits. So if you do that and you get caught, and again, nowadays, although my understanding is it might be easy if the Medicaid card has a picture on it to exchange pictures, but nowadays, in most cases, if you go to a doctor or someplace that wants to see your insurance, they ask you other questions, date of birth and things like that, so to make sure you are who you say you are. But say, you got around to that and you did try to use somebody else's benefit card. If you get caught doing that, social services can recover 3 times the amount of the incorrectly paid claim plus a penalty of $2,000 per claim. And if you do it again in 5 years, the penalty goes up to $7,500 per violation. So that's the end of the paying back laws. This talks about going to jail. So under penal law, healthcare fraud is considered larceny, and that is a felony. So a false claim over $1,000 is larceny in the 4th degree. It's a Class E felony. It goes all the way up to a false claim over $1 million, and that is larceny in the 1st degree, and that is a Class B felony. And again, I mentioned this before at other trainings. So, as I'm doing these trainings, I think to myself, gosh, how could you bill $1 million and nobody noticed that? So, and again, back about 3 years ago now, on the OMAG website, they actually arrested some folks down in New York City who had been billing Medicaid for some clinics down there. There were physical therapists involved and physicians and various other healthcare workers that said they were providing services that they never did. And what they were doing was billing Medicaid for services that they never provided. So, and they did this over a period of 5 years. So it was more than $1 million. It was more like, gosh, I want to say over 10 million, if I remember correctly. But at any rate, when they got caught, the woman who was a physician that was kind of starting this scheme said, so what they were doing is they were using the names of homeless people. And she said, well, we gave them food vouchers so that they had food, but I will bet you that they didn't give them the food vouchers equal to the amount of money they took in. So they were just taking advantage of people. So again, don't do that. Either way, don't take advantage of people and don't try to bill for something that you didn't actually do. So each program at STIC has different laws, regulations, and guidelines. The description of all our programs start on page 10 of the compliance plan. Everyone is responsible to know and understand their own program laws, regulations, and guidelines. And one of the pieces of paperwork that you get is called an acknowledgement of receipt that says that you received the documentation that pertains to this program and that you've taken the training. Again, I mentioned we have to do routine auditing and monitoring. So there are quality monitoring surveys that when I was in the building, I would look at files and make sure we were doing the right thing. Now I more look at notes to make sure we're doing the right thing and billing or writing what we need to write. We do routine examination of billing versus hours worked, and we do cross-reference signatures. So if there's ever a question about somebody committed fraud and we are looking at a signature, we do cross-reference those. Externally, we have an independent auditor come in a couple of times a year to check our books, make sure we're doing the right thing. And any program that gives us money can look at our paperwork or notes or whatever anytime they want to. That would include Access VR, the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities, the Department of Health, and the Office of Medicaid Inspector General. It is the responsibility of all STIC staff to report fraudulent unlawful activities or suspected fraud. The compliance plan is intended to encourage and enable others to raise serious concerns within STIC. So this sheet talks about what you need to do if you wanted to report something. I will also tell you that this sheet is located on the new STIC, well, it's on the old one, but it's also on the new STIC website. You have to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the website, and under resources, you would click on compliance resources, and then privacy and fraud practices, and then fraud prevention, and you will find this form. So you can notify me if you think fraud is going on, you can do it a couple of ways. You can call me directly. My phone number is at the bottom. Our main number is 724-2111. I'm extension 377. Or you can leave me a message on the anonymous hotline, and that number is 1-855-210-8495. You do not need to leave me your name, but I would need to know if it's a worker, the worker's name, the consumer's name, and if it has to do with whether they're working or not. If you have the dates and times that you're specifically talking about, that would be helpful because we could go back, look in EVV and see what was actually clocked in and clocked out. And again, you don't need to leave me your name. You can just leave me the information and we will do an investigation. when you do that, again, the alleged activity, the parties involved, and if you have any evidence where I might be able to locate that. In the past, sometimes people would screenshot me information and send it to me. I've had people do videos and send it to me, various things, to prove what's actually going on. But again, you don't have to do that anonymously. I mean, if you decide to be anonymous, certainly you can do that. If you call me directly, understand I would never share information during the investigation. Your name is always kept confidential. I will tell you that doesn't mean that sometimes people don't guess. I do not confirm or deny that. I just say, I can't tell you that. But sometimes they guess, but understand I would never share that kind of information with anyone. I also cannot get back to you about the results of the investigation. That we're not allowed to do that. So again, at this point, the two ways to do that is call the anonymous toll-free hotline. And if you want to call there and leave a message and tell me your name and want me to call you back, I can do that too. That's totally up to you. Or you can call me directly at extension 377. I've also given you our executive director, Maria Dibble's extension, as well as our assistant director, Jen Watson's extension, and the Office of the Medicaid Inspector General's hotline, which is 1-877-87-FRAUD. Examples of things to report: violations of the code of conduct. If consumers being abused by somebody, we want to know that. Billing for services that weren't actually provided. Somehow submitting some type of falsified document. I'm just going to mention, I think sometimes workers think that we're just being picky when we ask them to do things or do it a certain way. Just give you an example of when the Office of Medicaid Inspector General does an audit, what types of things they look at. It made me think of this submitting falsified documents. So back a few years ago, care managers used to be Medicaid service coordinators. They just, they changed some of their duties and they changed their name. But if you were a Medicaid service coordination supervisor, you had to have a bachelor's degree in order to have that position. So one of the audits that OMED did was in upstate New York. It was a cerebral palsy agency, and they don't just look at a copy of your diploma. They actually call the school to see if you actually graduated from there to make sure it's not a falsified document. So indeed, one of the supervisors that for Medicaid service coordination did go to college outside the United States. And when they called to check on her degree, what they discovered is that the year she graduated, there was a rebellion in that country, and therefore the school was not certified, and so she did not have a bachelor's degree. I don't think she was aware of that. I think that was purely a mistake. It didn't matter. Because she did not meet the requirements of a supervisor, they disallowed all the billing of all the service coordinators that worked, beneath her that she supervised. So that's the kind of thing they do when they audit. So sometimes when they ask you to change things or maybe write more in your notes or whatever it isn't because we're just trying to be difficult. We want to make sure that when we get audited, you provide the service, we want to make sure that the auditors are aware of that when they look at your notes. So I just wanted to mention that. So upon a receipt of an allegation of noncompliance, it's my responsibility to do an investigation. I have 10 business days to do that, put it in writing, give it to our executive director. In the event that our executive director is suspected of some type of fraud, I report to the board president. Any violation that results in mistake having to pay over $5,000 of funding is also reported to our board of directors. This is part of your test. Every confirmed act of noncompliance may result in corrective action or discipline. Any individual that knowingly commits or is involved in any type of noncompliance may be subject to disciplinary action outlined in STIC's Employee Agency Policy and Procedure Manual. And for CDPA, it is outlined in your enrollment packet. In addition, you might be subject to legal action. I just went over the laws and so you have a sense of, you can't falsify any kind of document. Failing to report a violation of the corporate compliance plan will also result in disciplinary actions. So again, if we discover somebody was committing fraud and had a sense that you were aware of it and didn't report it, somebody would certainly speak to you about that because we want to know when somebody's committing fraud, not because of money so much, as the fact that that means that somebody did not get the services they were supposed to get. And we want to know when that happens. On the other hand, knowingly making a false allegation of fraud would result in your immediate dismissal. This is called the whistleblower protection. It says no employee who in good faith reports fraudulent unlawful activities, participates in an investigation or hearing, refuses to follow unlawful order, report service violations, will suffer harassment, retaliation, adverse employment consequences, any other manner of discrimination, and that is called the whistleblower protection. So that means if you think something's going, again, talking about reporting information, if you in good faith are trying to report something that you think is unlawful or fraudulent, you should not get any abuse from your employer or other workers about that. They should not harass you. They should not give you a hard time, anything like that. Slash your tires, whatever. You are protected under this particular law. If you try to report something and you feel like, you were harassed or you feel so uncomfortable working at that place anymore, you quit or they fire you, you can take your employer to court. And if you win your court case, you would be eligible to get your job back, including any promotions you missed out on. They would have to pay you back salary, including any interest. I think that's it. Oh, excuse me, they'd have to pay your legal fees as well. An employee that retaliates against a person who in good faith participates in reporting unlawful or fraudulent activity would be subject to disciplinary actions. Again, that is outlined in our employee agency policy and procedure manual. In addition, that person would be subject to criminal and civil charges because it's against the law to do that. If any employee here at STIC is aware of any retaliation against another employee for the aforementioned reasons, he or she should report that immediately to our executive director. And again, you have her extension. It is 318 and it's on the other form. The whistleblower protection is in the Federal False Claims Act, the New York State False Claims Act, and New York State labor law. The last thing is called self-disclosure. It says in some cases, upon completion of investigation, it's been determined that there's been a violation of the corporate compliance plan. A report must be made to the Office of Medicaid Inspector General. This is known as a self-disclosure. In most cases, STIC will consult with an attorney to make the determination whether to self-disclose an incident and what type of information should be included. So this involves billing for services that we discover that we shouldn't have. The amount of billing has to be over $5,000 in order to fall under self-disclosure. So say by mistake we were, missing information on a file or whatever, and the amount of money we billed Medicaid for a particular service was over $5,000. If I noticed it or anybody else noticed it in an audit, we would notify our executive director. She would then consult with an attorney. But typically, we need help filling out the paperwork that's involved. So we would contact the Office of Medicaid Inspector General, let them know what happened, fill out the required paperwork, and we would pay back the money. That whole process is called self-disclosure. It is far better for us to find that, in a routine audit of the agency than for OMEG to come in and notice it during their audit. Because certainly if they saw it, they would not just take back the amount of money we overbilled, they would take back a little bit more, believing that if we made one mistake, we probably made other mistakes as well. So again, this process, part of your test, is a way for us to pay back Medicaid or any other funding source should we make a mistake like that. This site is for people in the Consumer Directed Personal Assistant Program. If you are looking to find consumers, the website, and this is part of New York State Labor, is https://new york.usnlx.com. You can access jobs without creating an account by doing the following. You click on the All Categories drop-down box and click on Company. You enter STIC, S-T-I-C, in the blank box above the drop-down box that now says Company and click Find Jobs. You can also give your name to the folks in CDPA if you're looking for more hours, because a lot of times individuals will call that department to see if there's, they can get a list of people available to work. If on that list, if you end up getting 40 hours after you've already put your name on the list, please let somebody in CDPA know that so they could take your name off the list and this consumer doesn't try to call you to, to see if you'd be interested in more hours, okay? So that is it. I typically ask if there's any questions, but because this is a video, if you have some, please email me or call me. And again, extension is 377. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.